Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly roundtable show where we talk about all sorts of things fire service related. Tonight we're talking about expectations as they relate to the fire service. We're going to talk about internal and external. We meet every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and if you are watching us live, feel free to join in the live discussion. You can leave us a YouTube comment. You can interact with the panel that way. And if you're on Twitter, if you're following us along, if you use the hashtag FFT for Firefighting Today and the word expectations, FFT expectations, we can track those comments and get those right into the panel and have you participate in the discussion. All right, so we'll introduce the panel tonight. First and foremost, Pete Lamb, retired fire chief. I'm the author of PeteLamb.com. I am the host of the Firefighter Training Podcast. Warren, say hello. Quick introduction.
Hi, Warren Whitley, retired assistant chief from Prince William County up in Virginia, now living on the coast in North Carolina.
Great stuff. Thanks for being here, Warren. Kevin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Burns. I'm a deputy fire chief with Framingham Fire Department, which is in Massachusetts, just about 20 miles west of Boston.
Thank you, Kevin. Joe Starnes.
Good afternoon, Chief, or evening it may be. I'm Joe Starnes. I'm with Oak Grove Volunteer Fire Department, retired chief from a place called Sandy Ridge years ago, and also co-manager of Project Kill the Flashover, and hang out with joestarnes.com.
All right, good stuff. Greg, say hello.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Howard. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief of the Dashwood Fire Department, which is about a 40-person paid-on call on Vancouver Island in British Columbia.
Thank you, Greg. Ethan.
Hi, Pete. Ethan Bansek from Lorain, Ohio, student of the trade and founder of Passed On Fire Training.
Good stuff, Ethan. Captain Joe. I refer to you as Captain Joe because I got two Joes, so.
That's okay. I'm Joe Pernesti. I'm with the City of Elyria, Ohio Fire Department, and once again, I'm glad to be here.
All right, thanks, Joe. And back with us, he was an early roundtabler. Dave, say hello.
How you doing, Dave LeBlanc? I'm a captain with the Harwich Fire Department in Massachusetts out on Cape Cod, and a little absence, and hopefully be back in more regularly.
No, glad to have you, Dave. I appreciate it. Charlie, say hello.
Good evening, everyone. Charlie Hall, Deputy Fire Chief at TF Green Airport here in Providence, Rhode Island.
Good stuff. Adam, last but certainly not least.
Good evening, everyone. Adam Ganaway, Captain with the Kellogg Fire Department here in Kellogg, Iowa.
All right, good stuff. So the genesis of this is conversations that I had over the past couple of weeks, right? I contact people contact me, we interact on all the time. And so the discussion comes up when we talk about leadership, when we talk about the fire service, we talk about all these things. The discussion comes up, how do we get conflict? Well, one of the ways that we get conflict is when expectations don't match. When your perception, somebody else's perception, when expectations don't match. So let's start with the public, first of all. And we all know that fire departments are under attack all over the country. And I mean under attack, not so much physically, although that's the case too, but that's not what I'm talking about. Certainly we're being attacked budget-wise, cuts in manpower, cuts in benefits, cuts in pays. What does the panel think, and open discussion, I'm not going to run the panel or anything, open discussion. What does the panel think the public expects from us? Not what we expect from them right now, but what do we think public expectation is of us? Dave, you want to jump in there first?
Yeah, I think that, it's kind of a double-layered question. They expect that. I don't think, number one, that they really have a good idea of what we do. And I think that that's partly our fault. We don't do a good job in educating them. I mean, we know what we do, but they don't really know. But I think the other issue is they expect that we're going to resolve their problem. Whatever that problem is, we're going to take care of it.
Okay. So they expect us to solve the problem no matter what. All right. All right, I think that's fair enough. Joe, that may have been you, Captain Joe. If you can mute down, I think those bells were yours, right? So if you can...
Yeah, I'll try. I got a giant speaker over my head, so...
No, that's okay. If you mute your mic, if you bring your mouse up here, you can don't shut the bells. That's not what I'm asking you to do. That's the real deal.
All right, okay. I think, okay.
Go ahead. You want to respond?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think they want us to pull a rabbit out of our hat, and what I mean by that is, in my town right now, I am going through this. We lost an income tax. We are down to the last couple days where we're going to lose 23 firemen from a SAFER grant. Nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what's happening, and depending on who you talk to in our community, some people just do not care. And even when you have a fire, as long as nobody dies, it's kind of sad, but as long as nobody dies, the thing that I cringe that I hear now more than ever is, well, that's what I got insurance for. And it's becoming commonplace in my community, and I'm glad tonight's subject is this, because I can't understand it. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, you said something that was interesting, because I was going to say, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. I agree with what Dave said, and I certainly agree with what you said. But I think the expectation, certainly in the course of my career, and I would say certainly in the last 36 months, I think the expectation has very little to do with performance and everything to do with economic fiscal stabilization. And I sort of agree with what you said, Joe, in that there used to be a time when if there was a fire, it became a teachable moment for us. We would say, look what happened down on 123 Main Street or whatever it was, and we had that opportunity. And I would say to you now that the expectation, and I'll expound a little bit later on, but I think the expectation is a little more of a fiscal reality than it is from a performance reality. And I think, there could be any number of reasons for that. Let's hear from anybody else on the panel. Somebody else please chime in, and then we'll kind of group this together. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I guess it might be on the other end of the scale from Captain Joe there, because we had a local fire department just do a very dramatic save of a 7-year-old. So we're currently riding the wave of quite a bit of public support. And I know within my department we're quite progressive with the community relations, and so far that's done us very well. We haven't come up against pushback against the tax raises as we go year to year.
So answer the question, Greg. What do you think your population, your geography, your demographics, what do they expect of the fire department? What do you? I mean, you can't answer for them, but give me your perception.
I don't think there's one answer to that, Pete. I think that from individual to individual, it's different, and it's one person might expect the world, and the next one might be happy when you show up in 10 minutes because. We're used to the provincial ambulance service taking 15 minutes to get here, Code 3. So my wife's making a face at me because she works for the ambulance service.
But yeah, no. So it's response time. That's an interesting. That's response time is an expectation, right? They want you there in 5 minutes. I think that's a fair statement. I think most people have an expectation of quick response, quick service. Warren, what are you thinking? What was your comment there? You want to toss that out?
Well, my comment was, from their perspective, what value does the department add to their lives? In a lot of cases, unless you do have a good PR program or community education, their only value that they see you is when you show up to their house or their medical emergency or fire. And in some cases, you're not going to be there quick enough, no matter if you were 30 seconds away. So part of that PR program that can be useful is managing those expectations. What is a reasonable response time? What is the manpower situation? What is the budget situation? Why do fire trucks cost so much to operate? Salaries, upkeep for stations and equipment for volunteer agencies, training requirements, all those sort of things need to be touched on so that their expectations are realistic.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're drifting in there because it's going to be a common theme as we go through the fire service itself internally. It's what have you told the citizens to expect? What is it you've said to them you can and cannot do? Has that conversation ever been taking place? And fire service generally does not like to have that conversation because nobody's going to stand up and talk about our limitations. What we can't possibly do or how we're challenged. We always bring up our limitations when we say, if we had some more manpower, if we had a third truck, a fourth ambulance, whatever the heck it is that we're talking about at the moment. And I also saw a comment that I want to throw out that's important. That is, obviously their expectation on a Tuesday afternoon is one thing. Their expectation when the kitchen's on fire is something entirely different, right? In time of emergency, that perception changes. So thank you for that, Dave. Joe, you got something you want to throw out, Joe?
Well, I'll be the controversial one again. Surprise, right?
It's what you do.
What I do. What if the one thing that being my old background, my old hats, and in my life up to now, it's one thing to talk about identifying with a customer and a customer identifying with you. I think we lose track of who we actually serve. I think from a customer needs analysis, from expectations, we end up talking more about what the politicians tell us we can have, and then we end up talking more about what we think the quality of service ought to be. If you hire a plumber to come fix a leak and he puts in gold fittings, you're not going to like the cost of the bill. Our unit cost, the way we talk to our customers, we're remotely removed from them. I don't mean we're wrong. I just mean that we're not connected. If we look at what we do at a customer supplier model, we spend more time talking to the city council or the county commissioners than we spend talking to Mrs. Smith 2 doors down from the fire station. So the relationship model, I think, is somewhat very difficult to manage the way it's designed. I think, and also, just to what we've talked about here, what do they want to pay for? What are they paying for? Would we ever tell a customer that we just can't afford to give you that service? I've never heard many people say that. I've heard some, but not many. So right. I think from a standpoint of expectations and what you named the show is I think we're making up our own expectations. If I wanted to be, you'll hear a vendor come in your home and say, I'd really like to do a little better job, but I just can't afford to do it. And they'll give you something, or they'll work harder for you at that point. I think we've lost touch with that. I think our model is missing a very significant piece. I think in some of the volunteer system where they're closer to their customer a little bit, I think some of that is more easily and readily articulated, but I don't think it's real right now. I think we're cruising for a bruising, and I'll shut up at that.
Well, you're getting to a point where I want to flip the discussion is what is our expectation of the public, and you're kind of transitioning there. Captain Joe, I'll get to you in a minute. Kevin, go ahead. What are you thinking? Just before we flip shift this a little bit, what are you thinking?
Pete, I'll just give a specific. I think the public expects that we'll act with proper decorum when we're in their house or their place of business. Specifically with regards to medical emergency, perhaps a death, that we're going to be professional and sympathetic, and possibly in the case of a structure fire that we'll explain to them why we put a hole in their roof or why we opened up holes in their walls. Just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, no, they certainly do expect a professional demeanor. I think that's a good point. Absolutely. Go ahead, Joe. Captain Joe, go ahead.
Well, I think I'll disagree a little bit with Joe Starnes here in the fact that expectations of what you can deliver, that comes down to what you're protecting. If you're protecting a small community where there's a lot of sprinklers and a lot of fire protection, that's one thing. But if you protect an old community with a very poor community that has a higher incidence of fire, you're going to have more fires. And if you can't deliver those services, yes, you have to be honest and say, there's certain things we can and can't do, but you're going to have a lot more fires than the smaller communities, or that we can't put it into one bowl, and that is that is what I feel, that we can't just zero in on one thing. It makes a huge makeup. It's the makeup of your community and what your hazards are.
No, I don't disagree with that. I guess what I would tell you is now is the time. Let's flip the discussion at this point. So their expectation of us is, be there when we call, act appropriately, do it affordably, blah, 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 blah. And we've covered a lot of that ground. What is, everybody here is in the fire service or just recently got out. What is your expectation of the public? What is the kitchen table? You're in the firehouse and you're in the middle of a kitchen table. What is your expectation of the public? And what do you think that is? Or what is it in your world? What is your perception? What is your expectation of the public? Anybody? Don't everybody jump for the mic. I'll give feedback.
I'll go, Pete.
Go ahead, Warren.
One of the expectations I had was give us room to do our work, meaning, when you see the pumper or the ambulance coming down the highway with the lights on, move out of the way so we can get to where we're going. Don't interfere with anybody that's actually working the scene. And I don't think that happens too often. I think we enjoy a better environment to work in than a lot of police departments in that regard, where, they know we're there to help them, and even in some bad neighborhoods, we kind of get the free pass to do what we need to do. The other thing is for them to pay attention to some of the basic rules, like, put your address up where we can see it, things like that, just so we can actually get to them when they call for help.
All right. All good stuff. All good stuff. I saw somebody else. Dave, you want to dive in? What's your expectation of the public?
I think, and it's a little bit unrealistic, but the expectation is that, especially in the career department, you hired a chief, your chief was hired by your elected officials or whatever, that the public would support whatever the mission of the department is put forward. So if the chief's going to, the town hall saying, I need a new fire engine or I need more staffing or whatever, that the public, I think the expectation is that that's what they should do, is support that. The reality is that doesn't happen, but certainly from the firefighter's perspective, if you sit around the kitchen table and talk, that's what you get frequently is that the public isn't supporting us, and why don't they support us? Because they put this guy in charge, and this is what he says he needs.
Okay, all right, that's fair enough. I saw a lot of commentary going by. Anybody else want to add? I did see an interesting one. We're talking about public expectations, and one of those is the transplanted community, right? So somebody who moves from a city environment to a rural volunteer, they realize that the protection is completely different, or vice versa, or however that works. So certainly that's there. What else is our expectation? Our expectation is, hey, you got the fire chiefs in charge, however he ended up there, we should support them, fiscally and responsibly and so forth. Warren's stuff about we expect them to comply with some basic stuff. Joe Starnes, what do you got?
Well, I was just going to say, Captain Joe, I don't disagree with you about the different fire problems, and often we have a large disparity between one area and the next, and we end up spending 80% of our funding on one side of town and 20% of our funding on the other when it comes to just the amount of activity and operations we have. I think from a customer perspective, I always correlate it to the same way you would do it in business. If you deliver a service, you expect the customer to pay their bill timely and to be nice. They expect us to do our services that they hired us to do and be nice about it and be skillful. I think one of the things that we don't do very well is we don't tell the customer what we need for us to be what they want us to be. So that would imply a lot of things. That would imply that we've asked them and that we would do it. Now, you can't ask a very complicated question to an unsophisticated customer. Someone has to be an advocate for that customer, and we pass laws and we we depend on the General Assembly and the tax base to take care of that. I think part of the deal is I expect the commissioners and the elected officials to be well in line with what the customer wants. I think that's the biggest gap we got. I think we get most of our funding and most of our capital money from our lawmakers, and sometimes I feel like the lawmaker is the part that's not well represented. I think they're the ones who are not in touch with our constituency.
All right. Well, let me ask a question. Did I pose the wrong question? Am I just imagining that there is a disconnect, that we're all getting beat up financially and losing manpower? I mean, I didn't imagine this, right? There is a real life disconnect, I think. I think what I'm hearing from the panel is, though, there are some people that really don't care if they have a fire department. That's what I think there is. I think there are people that really today have come to a point, I'll take my chances. And that's what I heard in discussion. That's one of the things that brought me to this conversation, is there are people that believe that. So if we're attempting to deliver what we think they need, I think that we may be missing our mark because we're trying to deliver something that they might not care about. If they need a ride to the grocery store, we're saying, hey, why don't you get a sedan? And they're saying, I can go on a bike. So, Captain Joe, I'll get to you in a second. Charlie unmuted here, so I want to just get to Charlie here.
One of the things we fail to do, and we fail miserably in our efforts to educate the public as to what we are, who we are, and why we need what we need. It's easy for us to say that we don't have enough manpower. Does Joe Average know why we don't have enough manpower if we don't let them know? Just to sit back and say we haven't got enough people is not a satisfactory explanation for everybody's taxes to be raised, however many dollars or cents that they're going to go up. But to explain to people and educate them why we need the manpower, how it will cut down on injuries, how it will enable us to more effectively do our jobs and to effectively respond to their emergencies and perhaps minimize the damage a bit more because we have enough people to do the job correctly. I think part of the onus is on us, that we need to educate the public and present ourselves in the best possible light that we can. And we don't always do that. Right.
Captain Joe, go ahead. Where were you going?
Well, I put in a message, but the one thing that we're caught, because just like the chief said from Farmington, Kevin, we have to be professional. But when there is a death, or at least in my town, when there is a major event, major fire, and even a small hint, our local union goes and says, hey, this could be in a better situation, then the newspaper and those that don't like us call us callous and unprofessional, and how dare you bring it up, and that person, that family, you can't. So, yeah, they're sort of right. We can't be callous and make light of a bad situation. But we have no other advertising to say we need more people than when it's in the news that a family of 3 in Elyria, Ohio lost their home and somebody died because of, we didn't have enough people.
Right. I guess the question is, and this is clearly a whole nother night. I mean, we could go in a whole nother night, but the impact of, there's 3 things that maybe there's 4, but in my mind, there are several things that affect the fire department. If the chief says or does a dumb thing, that's going to affect the community's view of the fire department. If the labor organization, or on the flip side, the volunteer organization, the fundraising, the president, secretary, treasurer, if either of those organizations do something out of line, the community is going to be affected, and an individual member. And so it is a very delicately balanced triangle that any 3 of those things could upset the apple cart and affect how the community looks at you and how they will react to you. There's no question. I have people, I think we're seeing this, I won't tell tales out of school, but Charlie and I here in Rhode Island are seeing some things. I mean, we have people that hate labor organizations. We have people that hate firefighters in general. They're all just lazy and what have you. And financially, they're saying it's not even a case of whether they can pay or afford to pay. They're just saying we're not going to pay. We're not going to give you the money. So it becomes an interesting challenge. Let's step off the public. I want to rotate around. I want to cover some ground. What is your expectation of your fire chief? What is your expectation of your fire chief? Dave mentioned, the chief's hired, the chief's in one place. I've been a chief. Kevin is a chief officer. Warren has been a chief officer. Joe's a volunteer chief. Charlie. We got a lot of experience here to talk about this particular subject. You're a member of the fire department. What is your expectation of your fire chief? Anybody want to jump in there? Charlie, you want to dive in?
Absolutely.
All right.
I think the most important thing that a fire chief can do is communicate with his people and realize that they are the lifeblood of the department. And a department that's kept in the dark or with people that aren't in on what's going on, and by that I mean the mission and forward movement of the department is being communicated either with a chosen one, a chosen few, or nobody. It affects morale in the department, and the expectations of the chief are reflected negatively. On the flip side, if you've got a chief that communicates and includes people in the department decision making, now I'm not talking about what goes on in the street, because we all know those orders should be followed without question. I'm talking about the day-to-day running of the department. My number one concern is the communication, both up and down the chain of command. It's very, very important that that be maintained.
All right, that's a good one. So your expectation as a firefighter is you want a chief that will communicate in both directions. So I think that's I think that's a fair one without question. Kevin, go ahead. What are you thinking?
I'll just piggyback on what Charlie said, and that is communicate the decisions that you make. I want a chief that makes decisions. He's the IC. He's in charge, and the guys appreciate that, right or wrong, and hopefully they're mostly right decisions. But the men want the chief to make decisions, to be the boss, to be their leader, to show them the direction the department is heading. So I expect my chief to make decisions.
So a couple of them there. We got communicate and make decisions. Greg, you wanted to chime in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I got the recent promotion to the deputy chief, and so I did a lot of reflection on this, and I think for me, with the volunteers, the communication is huge. So I'm going to echo what Kevin said. I mean, when we make decisions that affect the entire department or parts of the department, explaining the why of it is important, and that goes back to what you said in the beginning, insofar as making sure that we have the same expectations, so that when we roll something out, I expect it to go a certain way, that people haven't twisted that around in their head somehow to mean something else, and that's where the communication is important.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Joe, Captain Joe is, he's looking for qualities of a good chief. We actually did that show. We did a whole show on that. So you got some in the chat room. There is a leader, is a communicator. I would say somebody that I worked for was a forward thinker or a visionary, something like that. Somebody that could see beyond tomorrow, because sometimes you get mired in the weeds there sometimes. So anybody got anything else? What you expect of your chief? Because I'm going to flip that and say, what do the chiefs expect of their personnel?
One more comment, if I may.
Oh, no, certainly. Go ahead.
Kevin, you brought it up and you hit it right on the screws. A boss and a leader. And I'll add to that and say, which would we rather have? Because we all know chiefs that are bosses, but they're not leaders. We all know chiefs that are leaders, and I'll take a leader over a boss any day.
All right. I gotta see now. You did it, Charlie. See, there's a button you shouldn't push, right? And you just button. let me just give you my disclaimer, and I don't disagree, Charlie. But let me just give you my disclaimer here. And here's my disclaimer: I read a ton of management, leadership, chiefing sort of stuff. I read that all the time. And we are making a semantic game over what the word manager means versus leader versus boss versus, listen, we know that somebody that makes decisions, I agree. I think leadership is what we want. Leadership is the term we use in the fire service. But when you say somebody's being the boss, any of the panel, there's some gray-haired folks on this panel, and there's people that would tell you that you probably worked for a miserable chief who was standing out in the front yard, and he might have been the boss, but you still had respect for what he did or whatever. So I agree with you. It's leadership we're looking for, but let us not get tangled in the semantics of managing, leading.
I will tell you, it's my considered opinion that a good leader automatically is a good boss.
Yeah, no, you earn that.
Without even trying.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. You know who's in charge. I get it. Go ahead, Captain Joe.
Well, I think one of the hardest things about being a chief today is just like being the president of the United States today. There's so many forums, and we live in such a society where everyone is quick to attack and verbally abuse and say bad things about our leaders. That my dad was on a job for 30 years. You never heard, and he said back then the chief was the old senior guy with his dress cap tilted to the side, that he could have been good or bad, but you never said it as an officer on that department in front of the troops about whether the boss was bad or not. Now we hear it all the time, and that's just the way society is nowadays. But it really makes it changes how you are going to be a chief.
Right. Yeah, no, and we should learn how to behave. People should be taught that that's not an acceptable behavior. In your dad's time, Captain Joe, somebody probably went out behind the station and resolved that issue, and it was not an accepted behavior to do that. So let's go back. Let's get back on track. So what does the chief, or what does the chief, or should the chief expect from his troops? Ethan, you've been quiet. What are you thinking?
Pete, you were cutting in and out there. Say it again.
What's your opinion on what should a chief expect from his troops?
Well, I think the chief needs to know that the company knows how to do their job well and how to do it efficiently, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, they need performance. The chief needs to know the company's going to get the job done. I think that's valid. I think that's a fair statement without question. What else? Anything else? Does somebody else?
I'm going to go back to what you said about taking him out back and beating him up, and
I was recounting a tale of old. I was not advocating that, Greg.
There's the local chief here, and when he taught the fire officer course, he said we got to the leadership portion of the class, and it was a day long, and he said we're going to sit down and we're going to watch. I'm having a mind blank. What's the Saving Private Ryan?
Right.
And we're gonna learn about leadership, and there's a portion in there where the captain is talking to the crew, and he says, "You guys know better. I bitch up and not down. I'm not going to tell you what I think about this mission, and when I do, I'm going to talk to my boss, and I'm going to say, this is a great mission, sir, and I think this is a great use of our total sarcasm." But what he's saying is, we don't bitch downhill, and it's fundamental, because when the lieutenant bitches out his captain to the crew, he doesn't realize that he's chopping his own legs out from underneath him. He's giving the crew authority to bitch him out when he's not there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Somewhere, and I don't know where that got lost, but I push that, and I expect that of my people. If a lieutenant or a captain has a problem, come to me and we'll talk about it with the door closed, but don't talk to your crew about it, because we be unified as the leaders in the department.
Right. No, I agree. Warren brought up a great one. The Mass Fire Academy for years in their officer program was we watched 12 O'Clock High. That was a great film. That was actually part of the program to some degree. What can the chief expect loyalty, or is that done? Have we burned that bridge? Is that is that ship sailed, or I don't know. Can the chief expect loyalty from his personnel, or are those days gone? Go ahead, Dave. Did you want to jump in?
I think that he should expect loyalty, and I think that especially from the officer corps, that should be a mandatory condition of respect. I mean, he's the chief, he's the boss. You can argue with him in private, and you support him in public, and the loyalty has to be there. Loyalty up, loyalty down. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. Greg's making the comment. It has to be cultivated. It has to be fostered, nurtured, planted, and all that sort of stuff. No question about it. I think that's true. So, how do we get in trouble? We've talked about the public. We've talked about expectations of offices. We're talking about that now. What do we do about this? We can talk all night. We can solve all the problems of the fire service. How do we bridge this gap? Anybody talk about the expectations? Let's talk about it. How do you fix anything we just talked about it? Joe, you're talking about Captain Joe is talking about losing 23 members in a week. Some of that, I could go off on a tangent here about SAFER grants, and that's a whole nother story here. But, we've seen a lot of departments, David and I, Kevin, we know one here in southeastern Massachusetts, they lost 20 or 30 guys, same thing when the SAFER grant runs out. But what do we do to change the public's expectation? Is it bold thinking, or is it do what we did yesterday? Who's doing it well? Is anybody doing it well? Even in private industry, can anybody on the panel give us a when was the last time you ordered something, or you bought something, or you shopped somewhere where you were pleasantly surprised? Anybody? Nobody's ever been pleasantly surprised. What? Certainly not on this panel. What?
Actually, I was.
All right. What do you got?
The house I bought was built exceptionally well by a guy who cared about the craftsmanship of his construction.
So so your expectation was you were buying this house and it was going to be okay, and you get in the house and it's actually better than what you had thought. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
All right. So that's a good one. His expectation was exceeded. How often do we exceed expectations? If you're doing 5, 6, 7,000 runs a year, whatever it is you're doing, I think all of us have been in the position where you get, a dozen thank you cards at the end of the year for 5,000 runs. You get a lot of cards in some of those. So I don't know. How do we exceed the public's expectation? How do we as offices exceed the expectation of our members? What are you thinking, Captain Joe? What do you got?
Well, I think just by showing up and being ready to go and to be a leader, I'll give you guys a real quick kind of a personal thing. But my father just died, and he was on the job for a long time, but he has also been retired for a long time. Long story short, just about everybody on my department, even those that I've had differences with, expressed their condolences, showed up, and showed an amazing amount of respect. And I was quite humbled by that. And I think that I told my wife, I said, I couldn't believe it. She goes, Joe, not everybody may like you, but it showed that they respect you. And I'm not blowing my horn or ego or anything, but that has also helped me keep driving and keep being a good leader or a good boss, is that, wow, I mean, it does work sometimes. I mean, it does, it's a tough thing, but sometimes a pat on the back is a good thing like that to keep you going and keep you leading. And because not everybody always tells you you're doing a good job. That was just a kind of a thing that kind of surprised me for the better. That thought, wow, that's quite a thing.
So that exceeded your expectations. All right, that's a good one. That's a good one. That exceeded your expectations. How many of you communicate your expectations either? We always hear the story, when I become a new officer, I'm going to take the crew and tell them what I expect of them. Okay, yeah, right. You know, these are stories. It's like a pie making company. It's table talk. We talk about it around the kitchen table. You know, I don't know how often that does that. When you bring a new recruit into your department, is there departmental expectations that are given to that person? Does somebody sit down and say, this is what is expected? Not, I'm teaching you Firefighter 1 and when to wear your air pack and here's SOP number 6. Does somebody say, this is how we behave in this department? I'm seeing some no's, I'm seeing some yeses. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in this new role and I'm beginning to do that, and I think what I'm preaching is everybody's a leader in the department. And to me, leadership is when we create an environment where everybody can perform to their best. So if you're on the floor or you're in the back of the rig, you do that by looking after the guy that's next to you, and then that's leadership, whether you wear bars on your shoulder or you're, the pro beat on the floor for the year. And that's really what I expect of everybody. It's a simple question. If what I'm doing right now is not for the best of everybody in the department, then it's wrong.
Right. Okay. It's sort of like triage in many ways, right? Do the best for the many, right? Do the best you can for the most people at a time, and sometimes that doesn't always come out that way, but that's exactly right. Everybody has an opportunity to do the right thing at different times. So I would say just one of the takeaways for this tonight, as we're talking about, if you are not making your expectations known to your newest members, then certainly that needs to be done right up front. I think that's got to be done right up front. I think that's key. What about the expectations of the public? Because that's a tough one. That affects everything. How do we change their expectations? How do we enlighten them? And I agree. Warren's talking about now. This is an evolving situation. You can't do this on Tuesday. I mean, this thing changes all the time. You got to keep it moving. It's got to be fluid. So that certainly takes place. How do we change the expectation of the public? Or are we convinced that we are the only way to do this? For example, when we talk about, the biggest cost in a career fire department is labor. It is what it is, right? I was a fire chief a long time. You're not going to save any money in the paperclip account. It's people. That's where our number is. What are we doing? Is that the only way we can provide fire protection to a community? Is that the best way to do it? ISO came. The first time I went through an ISO rating, the guy left and I said, all right, I think I got it. He said, what do you got? And I said, I need a barracks full of men, more trucks than I can drive, and a hydrant on every corner. I'll be good. Is that what you're telling me? And really that's what he was telling me, was that's the only way you can fight fires. Is there anything we can do to change the public's expectation? Anybody? Kevin, what are you thinking?
I'll take a shot, Pete. Just to communicate to them that we're, at least where I'm working, we're sort of a two-headed monster. We have a suppression piece and a prevention piece, and sometimes the suppression piece loses out because of the great job the prevention piece is doing. So fires are down, but there's a reason why fires are down, and it's because of smoke detectors and inspections and prevention inspectors getting into the schools and doing fire prevention awareness, and to try to communicate that to the town or the city, the city fathers, that maybe we're not going to as many fires, but that's because we're doing such a good job on the prevention side. And don't let one lose at the expense of the other.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me be devil's advocate for a minute. And this, I'm a fire chief talking. I didn't lose my mind here. If, in fact, prevention is got a crew of people and a bunch of stuff, and fires are down, do I need as many engine companies as I needed yesterday? I don't know. I'm asking a question. If we are positively impacting the way emergencies are occurring, I understand potential. Please, I mean, don't anybody think that I lost my mind. I get it. The whole city could burn tonight. I got it. The potential is potential. But if in fact I'm impacting my runs, why do I continue to ask for more manpower each and every year? I don't know. I'm asking the question. I'm playing devil's advocate.
Well, if I could. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Captain Joe.
Well, then I need somebody to help me with this, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but when I started, we had 5 engine companies, a truck, and a rescue truck. Now I got 3 engine companies, a truck, and a chief, and that's it. When I started, our runs were at around 1,500. We don't do EMS. Now we run first responders. Now we're at 4,000. So our calls are all going up, but our people and equipment are going down. So, somebody help me out here. It's not slowing down.
No,
at least in my town.
We're going to more incidents. There's no question. We're going to more incidents. And I would say that any fire chief in the United States of America, even the most progressive ones, and I can't tell you the number of times I heard this, Joe, and I'll get some head nods here. Why are you sending a fire truck to an ambulance call anyway? Why are they're coming out of the same station? Why are you sending a fire truck to an ambulance call anyway? So people don't even want that service that we're providing. I know why we're doing it. Sometimes the engine company's closer. We got paramedics on engines. You got advanced life support engines. I got all that. I got it. But we have increased what we're doing. And I'm saying that the public may need... I had a lady just vehemently, she said things about my family and farm animals. And I mean, she was really talking nasty to me because we sent a pumper and her father was in respiratory arrest. And we sent a pumper in an ambulance. And this lady was castrating me that we were wasting diesel fuel because there was no need of that. She had called for an ambulance. And I just wonder, and I think some of you have probably heard crazy stories like this. I'm sure we've all heard crazy stories. I'm not suggesting that we stop doing it. I'm suggesting that we got to figure it out, and we got to figure out if that is the best way to deliver our services. That's all I want us to think about as professionals. I want to say, are we delivering our service exactly the best way that we can? And I don't disagree. Somebody's talking in the chat room about, social media is very good most of the time. Social media brought all of us professionals together in this room, but social media could be an enemy as well. I mean, there's a lot of information and misinformation out there. So what are your thoughts as we begin to wrap this up? What are your thoughts about, let's talk about expectations. How do expectations, let's just do the general question as we begin to summarize. How do differences in expectations affect the fire service? Tonight we've talked about the difference between us and the public. We've talked about men and officers and chiefs. How do expectations affect us in the fire service? Adam, let's start with you down on that end. Let's just run the panel and we'll get a summary statement. How do expectations affect us either internally or externally?
Well, as being a captain, if I got my guys out there, I expect them to do their job. And when we show up to calls and we look like a bunch of clowns out of a clown car, our expectations kind of go down in the public's eye. That's my opinion. Okay,
performance-based expectation. All right, I can see that. Charlie, how do expectations affect us, either internally or externally? What's your opinion?
Well, there has to be a reasonable expectation for someone's skills and abilities to be used for the maximum when it comes time for us to respond to the bells. I think the officers in today's fire service, and sometimes I'm guilty of this myself, quite frankly, you get tired of the fight, and I don't expect to have everything be a fight and an argument. And I made a comment in the chat room about 10 minutes ago about the generational difference. I think a lot of it has to do with that. Perhaps old geezers like me, Joe, Pete, Kevin, not quite, but almost. We're not used to having that anything thrown in our faces. Not to say we expect to be followed without question like sheep, and I don't mean that at all. I don't mind a lively discussion, but when it comes time to do the simplest of tasks and you start getting an argument from people who haven't been there really that long, it really starts to get to be a grind. And I'll just speak for me. I'm getting a little tired of the fight.
Yeah, I've often said that the greatest quality an officer can have is stamina. To do the right thing every day in the face of adversity is sometimes a difficult challenge.
And that is becoming more and more difficult, Pete.
Yeah, no, I agree. I did take a little bit of offense to the sheep joke, having the last name Lamb. The sheep joke was a little out of line, but I'm going to let it go. You're right? I'm going to let you slide.
I'm not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes.
All right, Dave, what are you thinking? How do expectations affect the fire service? Internally, externally, what are your thoughts?
I think it's, that's a huge question, but I think that we do a poor job of communicating our mission to the public, so their expectations may be different than what we think their expectations should be, which is kind of what we talked about tonight. I know one of the things that I do, and you kind of reference it, when I become a captain, but it's a conversation that doesn't happen once. It happens on a daily basis with your crew of, this is what I expect, this is what I want, this is not what we're going to do. It's constant correction, and it does. It wears you down after a while. There are days when you're more tired and you didn't do a single run just because you're trying to keep everybody in the herd. So, the job is all about expectations, and it's all about us meeting them. And I firmly believe if we get off the truck and we're not dressed and ready to go, we failed the most basic mission of providing a service. Even if it's a water leak or the most simple call in the world, if we're not ready to go when we get there, we failed. And that's my expectation and the standard that I hold myself to. And that, but again, everybody's different. Yeah. No, that's good stuff. Well said, Dave. Captain Joe, what's your summary? How do expectations affect us? How do we fix it? What are you thinking?
Okay. I think I mentioned about Dave Dodson at FDIC, and if nobody has heard that, Google that or put that up on the YouTube. But he talks about his son being born in a hospital, and the doctor just not paying attention for just a very small period of time led to some complications and his child having some medical issues for the rest of his life. And he said that he went to the symbol, the hospital was the symbol of, we know what we're doing and come on in, and it let him down. For the rest of our careers and long after we're gone, red fire trucks and fire stations are going to be a symbol. It's the people that are inside that come and go, that when you're there, you know what, you got to do your very best, and some people are going to throw mud, but you got to wash yourself off, and there's a new day, and keep going. I think, though, a lot of departments, they'll get way down, and they lose their expectations, and then that's when you have problems.
Yep, fair enough. Ethan, what do you got out of tonight's discussion? How do expectations affect us?
Pete, I think how the community perceives us plays a huge role in the morale of our department. But the thing is, the public is cutting us because they think that it's going to be cheaper for them, but yet they still expect more and more out of us, and that we're still getting there quickly and managing their problem efficiently. So, like Joe said, knowledge of going to conferences and bringing that back to the community, it's all good PR there.
Yeah, no, I think we've got to measure, we've got to understand what it is they're thinking. I think that's important. Greg, how do you summarize what we've talked about tonight?
In my new role, I really have to set a lot of expectations, and I guess I have to do that by always appearing to put in 100%. And that came up with Captain Joe and saying, people are going to the symbol. And the more bars on your shoulder, and that it really doesn't even matter. When you're on the floor riding in the back of the truck, you are the symbol, and I can't expect anybody below me to rise up to anything more than what I am, where I appear to be. So that's, I think, how I try to set expectations is by I'm usually the first one at the fire station on a drill night and the last one to go home, and that's how I manage the expectations.
Yeah, no, great. It's, that's exactly right. When expectations are differently and there is a gap, the way you manage the gap is really what shows here. The way you react when things are not going well really makes a difference. Joe Starnes, what do you got in summary about expectations, how they affect us, how they affect the organization internally or externally?
Oh, everything said, I agree. I don't have any heartburn with it. I think one of the problems is we really don't have the skills we need. Expectations have to be known. A lot of times we don't spend a lot of time trying to find out what they are, and that works both internally and externally. It works as an officer working with his crew or her crew, and it works with the firefighter getting the expectations of the officer, asking the questions that they forget to be covered on. They ask the difficult situation that wasn't in the training manual, the guidance and wisdom of another set of experiences that drive that creating that and causing that conversation, both for the customer outside and with the customer inside. I think what we have a problem with is we don't spend enough time making sure those expectations are known and then finding a way to find out if there's a gap, like you talked about, and managing that gap. One of the biggest things I thought of while we were going through and listening to the panel was probably the hardest thing I see with our history and our legacy and respect and humility is simply discipline. If I see one thing missing in a career that I've come through, is simply that the discipline is not managed anymore. And it could be as simple as walking in a volunteer system and calling somebody a nickname versus calling them captain. And that discipline is equal to respect. I think the customer deserves the same amount. I think when we're sitting on our butt, we ought to be relating, because the word that makes up relationship is to relate. And I think that's what we're missing. I think that's where we need a whole set of values that tell us to get out. Because if Mrs. Smith likes us, it'll pay off. If she doesn't know who we are, it won't pay off. So there's a big gap there. So that's my take on gaps.
Yeah, no, well said. Kevin, what are you thinking on tonight's discussion? Expectations, how do they affect us internally and externally?
Pete, I'll just give one specific thing to wrap it up. From my perspective as a shift commander with my officers and with their role as an officer with the members, firemen want to be told what to do. You have to communicate what is expected of them specifically. And along with that, if you set your expectations high, you're going to get on balance a high performance. If you set them low, you're going to get on balance a low performance. And as a wise man once told me, what you allow to happen without your intervention becomes your standard. And so I would just end with that, to communicate expectations and make them fall on the high side.
Yeah, absolutely. Warren, if you say what they said, if you say those words, yeah, everything they said, I'm going to be, I'll never take it. What do you got? How do you wrap it up here?
Yeah, what they said. They said some really good things, and I even had them written down, and they took some of them. But I think the crux of the matter is communications. The expectations from wherever they're coming from, whatever level of all the things we talked about, the expectation is not communicated, then we have the Joe gap, and that's where all the problems lie. But I think you also have to be able to create the environment where especially if we're talking the department level and service delivery to the community, we have to be able to provide them the resources to meet the expectations of the public. Whether it's training or whatever, we have to figure out how to meet those expectations based on the resources we're allocated.
Okay. And the only other thing I would say, and you know, that it's a good play off of Warren, is that, or if we can't meet those expectations, we got to reset the expectation. Whether that's internally in the department, we have to reset. And we're not very good at communicating. I don't really care what your expectation is. Here's what's going to happen Tuesday, because that's what I can do. Or that is an unrealistic expectation. And I think that's where we often find the conflict, is when the expectations don't meet. And that was the root of our discussion. Good stuff tonight from the panel. Always great stuff. I love the discussion here. If you are social media inclined, you can put out this YouTube link and have folks look at it later. They couldn't be with us live. If you do want to join us live, we will be here again next week, 8 p.m., Sunday evening. Next week's show is actually already planned. Deputy Blackley from Wilmington is coming in with Ed Camo. We're talking about community risk reduction. So this is not a hose and ladder one. This one is a little bit something else. So that's where it's going. So all right, we will see you next week, and until then, stay safe.